focusing on the diversity and inclusion piece, obviously you've been on the side of working for a private equity fund,
Well,
but how would you describe the current state of diversity and inclusion at the moment in the private equity space?
I think private equity, you're still learning about it. And, I really have a question mark in general around private equity, around their understanding of DEI or whatever you call EDI, however we might term it. I think it hasn't been something they had to do. I think investors into private equity funds have said now, listen, we need to see your statistics. We need to see your thinking about it in the same way you're thinking about ESG and what are you doing about it. So I think this has been driven by a need from investors saying to GPs, this is what you need to be doing and this is what we need to see, but it's still quite nascent. It really is. And I think when we talk about diversity, what we're really talking about is what can be measured. So, in this country, it's gender. So looking at gender. There is a little bit of looking at an understanding that private equity firms are generally made up of people who are very similar to each other. All went to university, all very similar.
Mhm.
I would say lacking in terms of all forms of diversity, really. So I think there's a sense that, we should partner with organizations like SEO and Level 20 to try and bring in those from underrepresented groups. So perhaps minorities or, lower socioeconomic groups. But they started with gender, where everybody starts. But I think myself, there's such a long way to go. There really is. And I just do wonder about them being bought into it. Are they really bought into it as part of equity firms? Are they doing it because their investors are saying this is really what you need to be doing? You should really care about this.
Definitely, definitely. And Elizabeth, what are the sort of specific challenges that you perceive, from a D&I perspective for private equity currently?
So private equity firms, generally, regardless of how it looks from the outside, private equity investors are quite risk averse around people. So when they buy something,
Yeah.
even though they do a lot of due diligence, you then try to mitigate the risk as much as you can until you sell it again. And so they're trying to build and create value in it. But I don't think they have a full understanding, the investors, of the people within them and what it takes to build a culture, what inclusion means, what diversity means. And so I think from that perspective, I think bringing in people from different backgrounds looks like a risk to private equity investors. So if you bring in someone who hasn't, let's just say you invest in software, if you bring in someone that hasn't invested in software before and doesn't come from that industry and doesn't have something in the background that they recognize or they don't know them, it's too much of a risk for them. So they tend not to hire. So they tend to keep to the same circles they've always kept to, which are generally white and generally male, and keep reusing those people. And so you don't get that new, fresh influx of ideas, of different types of people. I think the GPs are hiring more females, but they tend not to stay. So you've got that, but then if you haven't got an inclusive environment, it's quite difficult. And I don't think GPs mean to not be inclusive, but they don't really understand what inclusivity really means. So you've got to get that right before you get the diversity part right. But I think they're the main bits that I would say in terms of other industries, they really are still struggling with that. They still don't understand, well, why are females not staying and why can only hire lower socioeconomic backgrounds? Like they want to hire one or two people, but there's no role modeling because you look up at the top and it's white and male. And for females, it's kind of the same. It's like these long hours. The different generations don't really want to do those things anymore. So there are different expectations. Private equity's model is still very old-fashioned. You either fit into it or you don't. So despite some of the best efforts, that is quite a different challenge from other industries. Even banking, which, a lot of the people who started private equity probably come from banking. That's still a bit behind, but you still have more diverse and inclusive banks than you would have private equity firms. So I think they are unique to private equity in a way. They're just a bit further behind the other developed industries.